Well, we can always lean back on some of the stuff from friggin' what was it, the crossover episode.
Oh man, we're live. Cool.
All right, are we live audio-wise? I'll have to. Let me see. Well, Rob will tell us.
Normally we're not live.
And then we are live, and of course I've just been blathering like an idiot. So either way, yeah, and it's me looking like this. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, bingo. Anyways, hello, makers of the world, coming to you live in spirit from I3 Detroit in the innovative Ferndale, Michigan. This is the Make Something Wonderful podcast, where I'm poorly prepared, exploring all the fantastic ways we create. I'm Thomas Tusano.
And I'm Nate Carpenter. This week we have two guests returning for, how many episodes is this, Nate? 3, 4?
I think this is 3. I don't know.
All right, so we're returning for his third time's the charm. We have Nate, one of the founding members of I3 Detroit, and B, who I just met, who does community moderation on several different online communities. And this week we're going to be talking about specifically community building, both in the online realm and in meet space. So I don't know if either of you would like to give just like a real quick introduction. I don't think I did either of you justice, so.
I'll jump in for a second and say, yeah, there's history that goes back before I3 was a thing, and one of the things that fascinates me, I've been talking to some other folks about recently, is what made I3 succeed when some of the previous efforts did not, and what are some of the things that we have in common with other spaces that did succeed. And I think that's fascinating, and it still blows my mind that here we are, 10 plus years later, and it's still working.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to see that this experiment has worked for so long and continues to be stable as far as we can tell.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a minute and just more or less break something here. Because we've been discussing this on the show a little bit, and even behind the scenes. Well, mostly behind the scenes. We've skirted around for now, I don't know how many episodes, 19. So this is 19 episodes. 5 months we've been going on doing this. And I'm just going to give people a fair warning, like, we're going to talk about it, because it's touched all communities. We've avoided it for a long, long time, and I probably should have given people a little bit more fair warning, but we are going to go around the edges of it. What's up?
Talk about the fact that I shaved my beard.
Yeah. Nate, absolutely.
We're only going to go around the edges of it.
yeah, at least just a trim like I need. But no, to be a little bit more serious, and I thank you, Nate, for breaking my streak there, stride. We've all been affected by the pandemic that's ongoing. We've all had something. We've had something we've lost. We've had people, or we've had our regular schedules thrown into disarray as far as it goes. So tonight, we're going to be talking about more or less how do we keep communities coherent during difficult times, more or less. Like, what have we found? How do we keep even tones? How do we keep tempers even? How do we keep cohesion together? What is the real elements that help assist that? And so B's experience in virtual communities, and I have been under her leadership in a private Discord channel that we have with a bunch of friends, as well as I have seen Nate's leadership style in Meet Space with, again, I've mentioned before on the show, Nate teaching me philosophy and leadership and things like that, and I became his shadow. Nate, okay, get embarrassed about it. It's the truth. You used to pull me aside, like, yes, young hobbit, come listen. I have wise tales for you on what you should do in herding makers or whatever. And so, like, as much as we want to chuckle at it, the truth of the matter is that tonight we have two people who are very keen on either the philosophy or the innate practice of compassionate leading in community. And so that's what we want to talk about, because I think it's one of the things we need in today's times is to recognize leadership in community and recognize the work that goes into doing these sorts of things. So that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. We'll try to stay away from the technicalities, the numbers, the politics, and talk more about how it affects our interpersonal relationships and how we can manage these things in an effective fashion without stepping on each other's toes, because there are sensitive feelings involved. So with all that said, B, I want to point back to the Hive. And I want to say more or less, you have been running this Discord 5, 7, I don't know how many years now. I've lost track. There's members that have come and gone. There are people that have been gelled very well. There are other people who live on the fringes, who lurk a little bit. But as far as it goes, you've managed to keep an even keel and spirit in the hive of being compassionate, being kind, and sharing things that you love, and sharing in the joy we find in little things every day. From things as simple as posting haircut selfies to like there are other things, other like little quirks I can bring up. But what element, or what, I mean, I probably kind of answered the question, but what element is really key there? Like, what do you find helps either you run the hive or the hive run itself?
So I think it's been a thing since about 2016. So a little less than 4 whole years. And it's really been pretty much self-preserving. Like it's been pretty easy to keep coherent because we're all friends first off. If you're not my personal friend, then you're someone that someone else in this hive has vetted and said, hey, they'd be a good addition here. They're going to make some good commentary, some good memes to share. They're going to bring something to the table. Because at its core, the hive is something of a passion project that it's a safe space for me to share stuff and know that I'm going to get people who say, hey, that's great, or hey, that really sucks, and I'm sorry that you're going through that. And I can be that for other people as well. And I think that's part of what makes a good friend space, but also a good, more generalized space. Because even the like gaming communities that I'm a part of, we all have off-topic chats where we can share things like that. And like you said, there are some people who are there every day, and they kind of build up this core group of, hey, this is an active community and it feels good to be a part of this. These people are friendly with each other, so they'll probably be friendly with me too. And it just makes it appealing to people because everybody wants to belong to something. And that kind of belonging is kind of weird in an online space, I think, because there's a lot more nuance that's lost through text and online gaming, because you can't read somebody's body language whenever they're sending you a text message. You can't read somebody's tone through a DM like you could if they had called you on the phone and said, hey, I need to talk to you about this. So trying to insert yourself into those communities is a little bit easier, but it can also be a little bit harder because those groups that have the core people, you know, you have to decide, do I want to be on the fringe of that? Do I want to be one of these core players? How do I fit into this? And part of the hive is that everybody just fits. And the people who have gone, they fit for a while. And I think that's another important aspect of having an online community, is realizing that it's not going to be the space that everybody belongs to for all of time. You know what I mean? There's going to be some people who come in and don't last forever in that space, and that's okay.
Yeah.
To i3 over the history, Nick, because I know that like there's been people that have come through or burned out in some cases, or I guess the thing with i3 is they can physically move away, right? Like if it's an online community, as long as you have an internet connection wherever you are, right, you can be part of it in some way.
I think just listening to be here, I was thinking about what are some of the, you know, everything's great when you're on the happy path, but when do things kind of start to diverge from that? And I think the two main categories that I think of our problems falling into is energy management, which is, you know, burnout, and conflict, which is how do you resolve that? Does someone agree to disagree and you get along civilly, or you change their mind, or do they become an enemy, or do they just decide to leave, or whatever? There's a lot of paths that can take. um, and and ditto on the energy thing. If you've got people who are heavily involved, often they also have strong feelings. They're going to disagree on stuff once in a while. Do they let their energy turn that disagreement into something, a line in the sand that they want to cross, or do they let that turn into an avenue for compromise, or letting someone else have their territory? Um, and I think as a community, whether that's as a community leader or just as the kind of mass of collective responses to these situations, you can figure out how those things, or you can influence how those things are going to resolve themselves. And we've had pretty much the whole spectrum over the years. Of course, we all try to steer things towards the most positive outcomes, but um, for various reasons, sometimes that doesn't always happen.
So, all right. And now, how, Nate, as it more or less goes, how has I3 handled morale and tempers in difficult times? Because we did touch on this, but as far as it goes, I feel sometimes we allow things shift out just because we are so volunteer, and we have to set boundaries and only give so much to the organization. But at the same time, it seems that there would be I've heard this before. It's almost like it's akin to space travel. There's a certain level that a society will pass, based on their technology, kind of thing. So it's I'm trying to remember, and I'm probably way off.
The great filter.
Yes. How do we? What is I3, or what is seemingly to you would be I3's great filter? Where there's that what have we kind of used either passively, or what has been baked into the community and the consensus that allows us to be so resilient in difficult times? Because we found, I think someone offhandedly mentioned, I'm not going to quote site or source here, that makerspaces tend to do better in times of recession, that DIY, as far as it goes up. Like, I've been seeing news articles left and right. The pandemic has driven lumber prices up because, more or less, like, people are doing DIY projects. And so there's both renewed interest as far as it goes in the community, and there's also some very strong emotions going around as to what we should do, and discussing policy and all this other stuff. So, I mean, what does I3 do? I mean, how have we traditionally done it, and now kind of what have you seen as an observer sitting back at the community? What's the pattern you're starting to see kind of emerge?
And being a little bit involved in particular issues lately, I think there's kind of the overarching idea that the community as a whole, which is to say all of the the hackers and makers, the individuals that make up the community, is larger than the organization, and that the community benefits from having the organization here, that the organization sprang out of a need. I mean, there were always hackers and makers in the area, but the need for the space created the space. And so I think kind of coming from that is the idea that individuals can do their own thing outside the community if they don't want to be part of the community. I think that it's like, if you are not interested in being part of this collective experiment, then you can leave. There's no judgment. It's no big deal. There's no cancellation fee or anything like that. Just go on, do your own thing. And I think having that, it's not a big stigma if somebody's not getting along. It's just, okay, maybe this isn't the best place. I think lowers some of the friction. It lowers the stakes a little bit. It was even easier when there were more options in town. Recently in the last probably 3 years, I guess, we've seen a number of the commercial maker spaces just an absolute bloodbath of bankruptcies and stuff. But back when the Village Workshop was operating, back when Tech Shop was operating, if somebody wasn't doing well at I3, we could say, you know what, maybe you'd do better over there. And that's a much gentler way of saying, and the horse you rode in on. Because no matter what you're thinking, people don't like to hear that. Now that there aren't so many other options, it's it's a little bit trickier, but it's still, I think, this isn't life and death. It isn't stopping anyone from pursuing their passion. It's just, okay, if you don't want to share a bunch of people's tools, then you don't get to share a bunch of people's tools. You have to pursue it on your own. And I think that helps us kind of assert that the individual chooses to come to I3 because they want to be part of a community. We need to remind people of that sometimes, that this isn't their job. It's not like they're paid to be here and they have to do this no matter what. No, you choose to come here. And by reminding people that it's a choice and that everyone's here because we want to be a part of a community, I think it helps people keep the focus that being nice to each other and being nice to the tools and being responsible towards stuff is just part of being here. That's not optional.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So one thing that I kind of like to ask more to B, just because I kind of know it from the I3 side. One of the things that you had kind of talked about a little bit before we started the actual podcast was about how in a lot of these different communities that you've been in, you end up kind of gravitating towards kind of a leadership moderator type role just over and over again. And I'm kind of curious, like at I3, it's not really I don't think a surprise to anybody that the people who show up to the space a lot end up kind of taking a lot of leadership type roles, and it just because they're the people who are really into the community. And I'm curious, like in online kind of platforms, if that's the same kind of thing, or if you have any guesses on how that keeps happening to you.
A bit. Specifically in some of the like online gaming communities, I have tended to be the person to step up whenever someone says, "Hey, help." It's a good feeling to be able to help somebody with either, maybe they're new to the game, or the game isn't working, or they say, "Hey, I'm bored, somebody do something with me," and it's nice to be able to do that. And after a while, I think in online communities that really kind of gets you noticed, for lack of a better term. And so you just kind of end up gravitating towards being someone who people know that they can go to whenever troubles arise or whenever they do need help with that. And that's kind of what a leader is. I mean, even in spaces where I haven't been a leader per se, I've helped run events like in World of Warcraft, on servers for different guilds. I've helped organize events in ARC. Like I've said, it just ends up happening. Even in real life, I'm currently unemployed, but at my last job, I ended up being the, I guess, unofficial bug tester for new software, because I had kind of stepped up in my team as somebody who knew a little bit more about computers and was willing to share that knowledge. And so it gets you recognized, and eventually people will say either, "Hey, I've decided that you get this responsibility," or "Do you want this responsibility?" And it's a lot easier whenever you're more comfortable with that, because you can know your own boundaries and say, "Hey, that's a little too much right now," or "Yeah, I'm ready for it. Let's do this."
That's something that I think a lot of makerspaces have to try to impart on people that are like engaged in the community. That's something that like NomCon for, I mean, Thomas and Nate, you'll know what that is, but it's like a convention for like makerspace operators, or I guess, and that's one of the things that everyone's like, how do you deal with burnout? And that's like the question. Everyone has the question, and nobody has the answer to the question.
Oh, there's no answer. Like, there's no straight answer to that. And that applies whether it's a hobby or employment or, you know, anything at all. There is no surefire way to cure burnout. But knowing your boundaries and knowing your limits, that is a great beginning. And it takes some time. If you're not one of those people who knows how to say no or knows how to say not right now whenever you start something, you're going to get burnt out a lot quicker than somebody else. Yeah, I see you over there. That's you. I know that's you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, what you need right there is a keeping helping of work-life balance, as they say. And if you look on the bottom of the tin, it says ingredients 100%. I don't give a fuck. You know, like, you have to let it go. That's really it. You just have to accept, you know. And I think that the reason that a lot of us, myself at least, step up into positions of responsibility in the first place is there's kind of a control freak streak there. Like, I know what has to be done. It should be this way. This is the right way for it to be. I'm going to make it this way. And then it turns out it takes more energy than you have, or there are, you know, differing ideas that need to be considered, whatever. And at some point, the only way you're going to come through, see the other side of this thing, is to accept that it's not going to be 100% the way you want it. Let it go is the only way to manage burnout. And sometimes that means, you know, large initiatives may fail.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think with spaces like I3 that are like, or I mean, online communities as well, that are totally, you know, run by the volunteers, there's a lot of concern that some people have that, you know, this thing, whatever it is, needs to be done. Someone has to do it, or this thing that I love so much might not continue to exist, right? And so it's, if someone's got to do it for this to continue existing, and I value it that much, I'm willing to put in the effort to make sure that it happens.
Yeah. And I think there's a thing that, you know, again, speaking out of personal experience, a lot of us who, you know, kind of played on our own a lot when we were younger didn't do a lot in groups necessarily, or maybe we did and we ended up being the one who did most of the project anyway, is that we forget there are other people to help carry the load. And one of the really miraculous things about, especially a makerspace, is that it self-selects of people who want to carry the load, of people who want to do things and who think a community is worth having. And so changing that mindset of I have to do this all myself to I have to motivate and assemble and coordinate a group of people to, you know, all pull on this rope for me, and then we'll, you know, move the thing that's too heavy for me to move myself. That's really hard. Like, that is a mental, that's a skill. And it's not in books that I've been able to find, at least, you know. There's all sorts of books about how to lead, but they miss like step 0, which is convincing yourself that you need to be a leader. And that's, you know, that's part of it. Do you let this go because you can't do it all yourself? Or do you motivate other people to help and then not do it all yourself? Do you, in doing so, let go of some control because now other people are helping? Do you see the thing that you wanted to exist not exist in the exact way that you wanted it to exist, but it exists in some form? That's hard, but it's the only way. It's the only way forward.
Yeah, that was. If we can go back to live stream lessons from last year, where I was like, "Hey, let's do this," and like a few people jumped on, and then it got rolling. It got more and more and more people. And eventually, there was like 2-3 dozen people. I'll bring food. I'll do this. I'll do that. And at that point, like that whole weekend and planning everything was a huge exercise in exactly that, because I remember people wanted to do this plan or that plan or this or that, and then we had an issue with someone who wanted to have control over the situation, and we let it roll off our backs, and everything went well. And a lot of people said, as far as troublesome as it was, we had a lot of fun with it, and stuff like that. And that, I think, was the prime example of, even though I don't let it go to this day, because I'll never forget the work that I put people through, as far as it goes to this day, is an example of when I kind of more let it go, even if I was there coordinating somewhat a little bit, if not kind of like managing, it was still like, it will be okay. Like, there were things going on in the background, like people looking at me and more or less going like, we've got this. We're not like, they more or less had told people about this and had secured the angels who will not be named or whatever else, and the different things that went on, like towards the second half of the weekend. They're like, we got this. At this point, we're just inputting the donations to tick up the meter. Like, we're fine, so just keep the show going, was the thing. Just keep it going, even if we tucker out a little bit. And I'm like, okay, I learned to let it go and step aside from it. So I'm not sure we touched on it, but that leads me to another question. Yes, exactly. Thank you. You can. Yes. So we have a private chat.
Just about to ask if you want to go.
We have a private chat for guests, and that the show can see. Again, peeling back the curtain a little bit to let you guys see how the show works. And we have a text chat that we coordinate everything behind the scenes with. And Matt just put Elsa in text chat for me, saying, "Let it go." I will not let the live stream go. I will hang on to that as a learning experience. God. Okay. All right. Enough. Disney beat that horse already.
I didn't realize there was actually a GIF keyboard in Discord, so I actually went to my browser and got one, and it wouldn't play the GIF. So I felt, to make the full effect, I had to actually find in the GIF keyboard.
Yeah, that's fine.
What's funny is that with that GIF, if you look very carefully, and you can look this up, viewers online, it's the one of Elsa where she smooths her hair. Her hair clips through her shoulders, and Disney just let that go too. Not everything is perfect.
Yeah,
it's not gonna be perfect.
How much money did they make on that movie? Like,
exactly. You gotta let it go, because sometimes things are just gonna clip through, and you know what? They're still gonna be a hit anyways.
Yeah. All about the song anyway, right? I mean,
yeah, that's it.
What money is.
Anyway, before we get demonetized. So, as one of the things that I've noticed, a phenomenon that I've seen, is that, and I did it for a while too. I am completely guilty as charged with this. Identity as a community member. Did we touch on this as far as it goes? Did I not set this up yet? I don't know.
We talked about it. I think it's a good topic to definitely discuss. I'm curious to see what you both have opinions-wise on it.
So here's the thing. When I first joined i3, I was really excited about it. I remember I had just joined. I was going to Dally in the Alley, and I told Christina, I looked at her, I said, look out for blue chips on people's belts, whatever. And she's like, why would I look out for blue? And I'm talking the little RFID tags we use to get in and out of the space. And she's like, why are we looking for these chips? I said, because it's kind of like a secret code that they're a maker. And I was really kind of hung up on this idea that, making is a fraternity kind of thing. And it really, like, we weren't that, for like one or two people might have been at Dally in the Alley, but I assure you they might have the wallet card and not the key fob. So either way, I was, and probably this was probably up until I was on the SynShop podcast last year, or a little while after that, I was kind of trying to manage my image as I am an i3 member and should hold myself as such. I represent a larger community and should hold and I still hold that belief on certain aspects, and certain things and certain issues, but sometimes I find that identities in a community can kind of wash away the person that's there, or they kind of become known to the community as someone who's a stickler for this or a stickler for that, and they have to, this is by this book and this rule set and this is how it goes, and this is what the rules say, and their identity becomes wholly tangled up in the organization. and I was warned early on that, from people, I3 is not a cult of personality. It should never be. It should never be this thing where one person is figurehead or is held as example. I do it to Nate because he's kind of the wise archivist who tells us how it was or how it used to be. And I need to stop that as well because Nate is no longer in leadership. That is one of my sins, but I like to poke fun at it because I recognize it and I satirize it. But either way, where have you guys seen and what can be done about people who find that this identity as a maker, or this identity as an I3 member, or identity, I mean, I don't know if we've seen it in the Hive Bee before, but this identity of belonging washes things away and leaves only, the raw and sometimes even negative foundational elements.
I don't think necessarily we've seen it in the Hive, but I will say that I have known people in personal life that have based their entire life about, this is what I do, this is what I make, this is my thing. And then say, like with crochet, I've known people who have done that to the point where they have physically injured themselves and they are no longer able to do that. And it's a very difficult thing to deal with. Even I recently bought a spinning wheel for the first time, which is super niche and nerdy, and I mean, I'm gonna make my own yarn. I've progressed that far into the hobby. And the reason that the lady sold it to me is because she was no longer able to use this wheel because of health issues. And we talked for a moment, even just in that brief encounter of, hey, here's your money. Okay, hey, here's your wheel. We talked about how distressing it is to lose that part of yourself whenever you have to say, hey, my health is more important than being able to do this hobby. I need to find something different. And it's a large part of your identity by that point. I mean, she said that she had been spinning for decades and not having that anymore as something to pass the time, as something to do to support herself, whichever part of her that filled, you could tell it was really distressing, but that she had come to terms with it by selling the wheel. And so I think about that a lot. Like, I know that there are a lot of people like you, Tom, you're a woodworker. You have different woodworking aspects. I know that people who would say, I'm an artist, I do digital art. Okay, that's a facet of your identity. Make sure you don't make that facet the foundation, because whenever, for whatever reason, you can't do that anymore, it's going to hurt, and it's going to take you a very long time to figure out who you are without that.
And you may hurt others as you thrash around with that realization.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's been something I think we've seen a couple times. That, when someone's already in a bad spot, and for whatever reason, that the case that comes to mind, I think, was a case of actually substance abuse. And then they find a community they can latch onto, and like it occupies all their time and it takes all their energy, and it's great. It gives them a distraction, a diversion, and then something else goes wrong and they realize this isn't going to work, or everyone else realizes first this isn't going to work, but they're so attached to this, they're clinging to this, it's much more difficult to, I'm not going to say those three words. It's much more difficult to take a new tack in life. So I agree. Identity is really important, and that's something where, like I was saying earlier, seeing that, trying to phrase it, when you're having conversations with people, trying to phrase it that the pursuit or the ability to do these things is the goal, and then the organization serves that goal, and then the individuals choose to be part of the organization. It's not that the individual is required to be part of the organization in order to have that ability. I think that can help ease some of those transitions, I guess.
To offer a little bit of personal stuff, because you hit on a note there, B. I am very much known for that stuff, and I've had to separate it. To offer anecdote and answer to my own question, I've had to separate it out because I've gone on this thing. My grandfather was a craftsman. My grandmother owned a yarn store. My mother was a tradeswoman, and so on and so forth. And I have this long string of identities and reasons to me why it matters. But at the same time, the other side that I've found to it is enabling others to do that, and saying to myself, I may be this, but others also deserve the opportunity to be this. And so now I am not just, my identity is not simply a craftsman, but somebody who enables others to do these things, so that, and so therefore when I do get older, I can be what my grandfather is to me now, and being able to let go of that and give that to somebody else. And so I've built that in, and I realized I had to build that in to other people, is when I cannot do something, I should make certain that others and all have the fair opportunity to do that thing. And that has been a more stable and well-meaning identity to build around than an organization or a singular trade or so on and so forth. And the integrity to see the follow-through of that, that thing that I do, be it a work ethic or a promise to somebody to do something or to bring somebody a material or whatever else, keeps me honest. So having the singular identity of being a woodworker is nice, but having the identity of being a tradesperson, an artist, a craftsperson, or however you want to term it, who enables others, and even when I give up that title and shed it in my old age and my joints go bad, like I know they probably will because there's a family history of it, that's part of the identity as far as it goes. When they eventually do go bad and I can't lift a hand plane anymore, I'm going to be able to enable others. So, and that, yeah.
So you're not Thomas the woodworker, you're Thomas the decent person who works with wood.
Yes, there you go. So.
Let's see. Oh, I just wanted to take a quick little diversion. All those people out there with stationary exercise bikes. No. Making yarn is what the word spinning means.
Agreed.
What's funny is that I'm looking for one of those stationary bikes as well. I have a lot of free time, and I've seen people turn those into spinning wheels too. And they sit there, especially like the recumbent bikes. I've seen some of those that have been like Frankenstein into spinning wheels. I'm like, how do you do this? Like I carried around, oh, my partner Chris still gives me hell about this. I carried around a bike rim that I found at a Goodwill in my car for the better part of 2 years because I said, I'm going to make my own spinning wheel. I'm going to make my own spinning wheel. That's why it's in the car. I'm going to make my own spinning wheel. Spoiler alert, it's sitting in our second bedroom right now, and it's not a spinning wheel yet. Mostly because we live in an apartment and those are not conducive to power tools.
So if you have one spinning wheel, you might as well have two, right? So now you can make your second one.
But it's no longer a stationary bike with two wheels. It's then a bike that goes.
It just happens to spin yarn while you ride places.
That would be awesome. Like that would
just leave a little trail.
And pinging Jody and Jan.
Even one of those that has like the electric motor. I mean, two birds, one stone.
A tandem bike, and then the person up front is like steering, so you don't crash into something, and the person back is actually like working with a third driven wheel. I don't know.
I love
sounds
it.
Like one of those like the brew cycle things, except like it's like a group spin thing.
Yes, good. That would be insane.
Grandma's got into group spin class, and then you just see one of the pedal pubs going down, and there's all way.
You say grandma, and yet there are several Facebook groups full of women my age, which I'm still under 30 for another couple months, that are full of spinners, and we're spinning things with names like Lisa Frank, Worst Nightmare, and Nickelodeon Vomit that are so intensely like 80s and early 90s brightly colored. You'd be surprised.
You gotta move to Michigan. Lisa Frank is from like 3 miles up the road.
Don't tell me that. Oh man. Do you hear this, Chris? I know that you're watching. Michigan is
He is. I saw him on YouTube chat. We'll talk later.
To kind of bring this to another one of the questions we had, if we're done with this train of thought, anyone else have any good spin jokes, or can we
No.
run them now? All right. So one of the things that it sounds like from the little bit that I know about a lot of like the online gaming communities is that when how people get integrated into those communities, it's usually somebody knows somebody, right? And they're like, I play this game that you also play, so you should like get into this community because then we can play together.
Mm-hmm.
Versus at I3, it seems like it's more just kind of people kind of wandering in the door. Like we have some people that have certainly joined because they have friends that are there, but I don't think that's the larger part of the basis.
Over time too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I get the beginning. I guess it was.
Yeah, it was mostly word of mouth, and then we started to get like page rank and search results, and people started searching for us, and then it's more walk-ins. But...
Yeah, so I'm just kind of curious on like the online communities. Then because you guys don't really advertise. I wouldn't imagine you don't really need to, right? It's word of mouth handles everything that you probably need from.
Sort of. On the World of Warcraft communities, a lot of them are so interwoven. Like I specifically play on Wormrest Accord, which is a roleplay server, which means that people make characters and they make stories with those characters with other people. It's great. It's a weird pastime. There are weirder pastimes, but there are entire, like, especially Discord facilitated such a huge move to online groups. There are Discords for, hey, my characters are goblins, or my characters are all humans or elves, or I belong to this guild.
Character.
Humans, I don't know, man. I don't get it. You're in a fantasy game and you want to be a human? I'm judging. At that point. I'm judging. But there are so many different communities that, like, say the leader of a goblin community comes to the leader of the night elves community and says, hey, do you want to advertise my stuff and your stuff, and vice versa? Kind of like, it reminds me of MySpace. Trade for trade, pick for pick. I don't know, but it works. As for other games like Ark or Terraria or Starbound, there are a lot of Facebook communities where people can say, hey, I run this server, I pay for this server every month, I want people to play with. Here are the mods that we run, here are the rules, here are the limitations, come try us out. And that's how I found the Ark server along with my partner. We play together. That's how we found this cluster of servers back in October that was just starting. And the people were hilarious. They have terribly dark senses of humor like we do. And it was just a whole lot of fun to play with. And eventually they said, hey, you guys have level heads and we really like you. Help us moderate everything. Help us keep an eye on the group. Help us keep assholes out of our space. Help us make sure that this is a good space for people to play in and that it continues to be that way. And it has been difficult, and especially in the past couple of months. My computer, unfortunately, is a potato and hasn't been able to run Ark very well, so I've had to kind of step down a little bit. I see you laughing, Tom. They call it the potato in the group.
Mine is just as bad.
It needs a refresher, and Chris has plans for it. I'm not a very computer savvy person, but he's told me that he'll make it better. But I've had to step back a little bit. But even then, like in our Discord, we have many different channels, and I've been able to fulfill more of a, hey, this conversation's a little not kosher for this channel. Maybe either take it to DMs or don't use that kind of language or that kind of thing. Like, we try to keep it upbeat, and if it's dark humor, at least it's humorous. That kind of thing. But even that server was advertised on like a Facebook group. And they have had other servers, because sometimes people just get burnt out on it. And they have had other servers that have said, hey, we're closing down shop. Here's a lot of our players that suddenly have no place to play. Can we send them your way?
Cool. Awesome. Sweet. New people.
That's kind of almost what happened. I mean, to a small degree with us and Tech Shop, right? I mean, it was one of the spaces that closed. It was like, well, if you want somewhere to go, we're not a like 1-for-1 replacement, but it's better than not having access to any of the fun tools that you had before. For sure.
Yeah, but I think, and I'm curious whether this applies in those communities as well. One of the things we struggled with that in particular is that people came from that environment that had a certain set of tools and a certain set of social and practice expectations. They had janitors and things like that, and then they come to this other place that has a very similar set of tools, and they bring those same kind of expectations, and then they don't, like, it kind of rolls off like water off a duck's back. It's like, oh, by the way, we all take turns taking out the trash here. So that's been something that we've really struggled with at times, is integrating people who come from a similar enough to be confusing different environment. I think in a lot of ways, somebody off the street who's never been to a place like this or anything similar can be easier because they're a blank slate. And so we've got community norms, we've got rules, we've got guidelines, we've got events and people you can hang out with and shadow and work with and learn. And okay, fine, they come on board, cool. But communicating those norms to someone who's new is different than communicating them to someone who's got them entrenched from a different setting.
Yeah, that was, like I said, not a super easy transition, I think, for some people. But it was a good. We got some good members out of it, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we knew it was coming. Like we all knew that this was going to be something we would have to talk to people about, and we did, and yeah, I think it went reasonably well.
Yeah. I can remember some of the logistics of that, and more or less like we looked at it and kind of went, oh boy, and like we knew through the grapevine, like, hey, this is happening, and maybe I think I remember seeing the Slack message about it even, like, hey, this might come our way. This might end up meaning that we have some new members and some new expectations, and have we refreshed the onboarding process? So. And is it going to translate properly? Is it, and having those concerns.
The onboarding was specifically geared to deal with those sorts of perceptions because they've been an issue in the past, just not with everyone. So I think we were already ready for it.
Yeah. The long and the short of it, yeah, I would agree on that point. So we're going to end kind of tonight because we're getting closer to the end, and I have a final question that's probably going to fill the last 12 minutes or so of the show. So we're going to go to the high concept question, and I'll ease more into the outro and how things go. Can pathways to inspiration, and this is from Rob. I need to give him credit for this because this is excellent. Can pathways to inspiration and new ideas be quantified? Is it the people and members of the community, the events that take place, the physical space and structure and architecture itself? What and I view this as what externalities, because I tried to look at this as well a little bit with some of my craft thesis, fancy college learning kind of stuff. We called them, me and my advisor called them externalities, things that are beyond the individual's control that then informs your design language, or what environment something is brought about in. So what are the things in the environment, the people in the community, the events that take place, the physical space, and like what kind of things can they be quantified? Are there things about them that either of you, B or Nate, have you found informed, either B on your end, I guess it would be player and member decisions in various forums or role play conditions as far as it goes. And Nate, for I3, I mean, what have you seen? What methods have you seen that have come about just because of the kind of the environment, and are there definitive reasonings you can point back to that mark that? So, and I'll go back and I'll put the question again so you guys can look at it without my tainting and touch to it.
I can jump right into that and say I think when people walk right in off the street, like right in the front entryway there, like on the wall, there's some stuff about signing in and things like that, and there's like a little printout of Bill and Ted that says like be excellent to each other, dudes. I think that right there helps to set the tone. This is not a corporate place. This is a little bit irreverent, but also very community minded. That's rule number one: be excellent. And I think as you continue into the physical space, there's all sorts of stuff hanging around. At first, it's very visually cluttered. There's just there isn't a blank square inch of wall anywhere. But even you look up and there's old projects hanging from the rafters, and there's all sorts of and some of them are bizarre, some of them you can figure out what they are, some of them are purely artistic, and I think some of that really sets the tone that probably someone walking in off the street cannot identify every one of those things hanging from the rafters. And I think there's probably no clearer way to say you can build things here that are totally nonsense if you just want to. And I think that's part of enabling creativity. If the space looks like an office, there's drop ceilings and whatever. If it looks too clean, then I think it's one of those subconscious cues that you kind of go into that like I'm in an office mode. And I think that would be deleterious to creativity. So yes, there is a lot more to it in terms of events and things like that. That's something I've seen other spaces as well. We'll have like open make nights and stuff. We used to do when we were younger and like really scrambling for members. We used to have a more open shop hangout Friday sort of a thing. And this is something I see smaller, younger spaces do because it's a good way to attract members. But it also connects the community really well. It's a good time to bounce ideas around because it's kind of unscheduled time. It's not a meeting, and that's those little conversations are when creativity goes from existing in one person's head and being the seed behind a random comment they toss into conversation to being a conversation that turns into collaborators, that turns into movement, that turns into a finished project. And so, yeah, there's a very strong social aspect to it. But I think to prime that, you have to get people into a mode where they're going to vocalize that weird idea that's sitting in their head. And the environment plays a huge role in that.
Definitely, I would agree with that. Even in online spaces, if you invite someone into a group chat where like nobody's talking, nobody's saying a whole lot, there's not a whole lot of even memes being shared. Memes are ideas. If you don't have ideas being shared and thrown about, and it just seems like, okay, we're here for a purpose and this is that purpose, people aren't going to feel safe enough to open up and say, hey, this is what I've been thinking about doing, what do you guys think? And even in video games like Ark is a super huge open sandbox of a world with dinosaurs and fantasy creatures, and you hit a rock and you collect stone and you build a wall. People are afraid to go out of their comfort zone sometimes until they say, hey, I have this idea. What do you guys think about it? Would you guys like to see this? And other people are like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Do it. I'd love to see what you do. And it's that kind of social aspect of other people are for this too. I'm not just doing this for myself that enables down the road, I'm doing this for myself and I don't really care if anybody else likes it. Because I think a whole lot of people think that making has to be for other people or for the general public, and it doesn't. And it takes a lot of stuff made for other people to realize that you can make stuff for just you too.
But it can be. This is something
Mhm.
I noticed in myself when I3 was, out of the crazy put a bunch of time and energy into renovating the building and opening the space and stuff like that, have a little bit of time to breathe and remember, oh, there's a personal project on the shelf that's been stalled for 6 years. I'm going to pull that out and do it because now I have a group of people to show it off to.
Mhm.
That was a hugely powerful, these are my people who will understand it, who will get it, who will appreciate it. That was a very powerful motivating force for me. So
Definitely, and I can understand that a lot too. I think with the age of everything being online, and it's easier to find your people in that whenever you're not secluded as much, whenever you don't have avenues to reach out and say, hey, I do this thing, does anybody else do this? And everybody else is just kind of like, no, it's kind of weird, but you do you. It's nice to be able to show this to someone and for them to go, okay, wow, that took a lot of time, or that's really creative, I love how you use those materials, instead of just, yeah, that's great, honey.
well, and taking a lot of time is something. You just mentioned finding your people online. You can go on image search or Pinterest or whatever and see a million pictures of similar things, probably to any idea you can type in there. Just word salad into the search box. Somebody's done something. And the problem is, I've heard it phrased that we're comparing our internal messes with everyone else's external, like finished, posed photos. And so it's easy to get discouraged when all you find are people's finished projects, and they may or may not document all the steps it took to get to that. And even if they do, they're probably leaving out some worse details.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're physically sharing a space with people, you're in there working on something at the same time someone else is in there working on something. They can't hide the amount of time it took them to do it. And so when they do get to that finished result, or when they hit a snag and they need help, everybody around kind of knows what they've got invested in it. And I think that helps. It can help, at least, inform the kind of criticism or the kind of appreciation that you can offer, instead of just saying, "Oh, that's a nice photo. Click the upvote and move on." It's like, "Wow, I saw someone sink 3 weeks into that, or 3 years, or whatever." And I think that brings people together in a way that photos just don't.
Definitely, I will agree. I've told Tom time and time again that I am jealous that there's starting to be more things in our area that are similar to I3 Detroit, but I am insanely jealous of his being able to physically be there and have access to all of y'all and your hive mind of, I know these crafts, will you teach me, or will you help me? And it's just really nice to be able, it has been really nice to be able to hear him talk about, this is what I'm working on, and I tapped this person and this person and this person to help me, and they all were like, great, yeah, this is what we're doing. And just to see things blossom from there. So that having that physical fraternity and that physical space is really important too.
Yeah.
I love when people tap me for, a little bit of what, maybe they see it as a big problem. Like, well, no, I can give you like 90 seconds of advice that will get you over that hump and keep you on your way. Because then, they go on and they finish the thing, and then they're showing it off. And I get to have a little bit of pride in that, even though, like, I was like 0.1% of the labor. But it's like, I had something to do with that. And when you end up involved at that little bit of a question here and there level, I had something to do with that and that and that and that and that and that and that. It's really cool.
That's what I like about Slack too, because it lowers the barrier to entry for that so much. Like if I have a question on something, I can just like post to the eLab Slack and be like, what in the heck is this part? And it'll take like 2 minutes. And someone will be like, oh, well, that's this. And here's the part number. And here's the Octopart link. And be like, cool, thank you.
So Woodshop is different in that you get 5 different people telling you how they did it 5 different ways with 3 different tools. Oh! No. But yeah, definitely, it's a nice to have, and I've had to, or I've felt that I should always be kind of giving back and enabling others at the space because of the wonderful resource I have, and this is. This has been kind of my way to give back to the community, to start this little show, even if like half a dozen people watch every week live, or if we only get 100 views across the week, I'm okay with that. But our community is still, they have some sort of sticking point to be like, oh, hey, yeah, I watch those two guys broadcast from their basements and or living rooms every Friday for 3-4 months or whatever else, and then when we go live, and we start going places like the NomCon presenting stage, or we, do our thing of going to YomaCon, or even when we go on and we do hybrid episodes with SynShop because we ran out of guests for a month-long stretch. Like, like that is it. So like, it's a nice thing to have. But I always treat it as nice things to have should have work put back into them as much as one can give. There have been moments definitely where I'll admit fault and go, man, I've bled for this place and I don't have anything left to bleed at the moment, and I have to step back for 2 weeks to a month to a while, or scale back my role and my involvement because I can't. So it's a nice to have, and it's been a good aspect, but setting the boundary as well and knowing what to give back and put into it is a huge thing. Speaking of giving back, still Linus Tech Tips level segue over here. We'd like to remind you folks that as we sign off here, because it is 10:31 and I know Pong won't appreciate it if they're all late, we'd like to remind you folks as we sign off here that we do partner with the SynShop, located at 1075 American Pacific Drive, Suite C in lovely Henderson, Nevada. Linked below is their YouTube channel where you can tune in to continue the conversation and making and hacking with Crux and the mighty Pong. So we still have a couple little housekeeping items as far as it goes. Matt, would you like to tell the lovely people where they can find us?
Absolutely. If you'd like to know more about i3 Detroit, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, or any other social media platform. I think we have all of them. Links are in the description, and if you'd like to support us, i3detroit.org/donate is your short link. In addition to that, like we were saying a short while ago, if you have projects that you are working on at any stage of completion or things that didn't work, we would love for you to share pictures of those with us so that we can include them on the stream and give you a little bit of a shout out. So you can tweet them at i3Detroit, or I think we have a hashtag that we use. Make something wonderful.
Yes. So so now that we do have the housekeeping taken care of and everything is set, I do want to say we won't be signing off right away because I would love to give our guests last words on their takes on community and maybe words that they have for people in these trying times, because they are both leaders and we should hear from them as far as it goes before we end tonight. So.
Community rocks. I'm gonna go tune into the SynShop thing. Bye.
Oh, okay. Nate's just like, screw you guys, I'm listening to Braun. Matt's just over there like, Tom's been on stage. Like, forget it.
I was just hoping that you weren't going to ask me to give some wise words. Like, oh, I don't know, I had to have something figured out already.
Quick, on the fly by the seat of your pants. On a little bit of more of a serious note, if there's not a space that you can fit yourself into for making, for gaming, for whatever, make one. It's easier now than it ever has been. Make a Facebook group, make a Facebook page, it's free. Make a YouTube channel, it's free. It's super simple to get into. And you're going to find people out there who want the same thing, but they didn't know that they needed it. And it's super nice to have that community of, oh, hey, I do that. Or, hey, I resonate with that. Let's get together. Let's share ideas. Let's support each other. And let's make a community.
Speaking of which, Jan, while you're still watching, get in here after we go offline because I want you to come meet B. So, yeah. as far as it goes, yeah, guys, thanks for being on. You've both been wonderful guests, and the ad hoc topic became something much larger, and I think we got to do a very satisfying dive on. So yeah, Rob, please play us off, and all of you, don't forget to remember to make something wonderful.
Thanks, Tom.
Right.
Welcome, and Rob will let us know when he's taken things offline. So, also, and now I need to figure out how to add Janet. I mean.